fire drill?
Yeah, you're telling me. Yeah, I used to teach traffic school.
Yeah.
I'm in traffic school, and there was one time we were in the room talking about Chinese fire drills, and I had a guy that was Chinese in my class. He's like, "What is that?" And I explained it to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, we just call those fire drills." You guys are killing me. Killing me.
Do we start at 1:15?
One.
Oh, that's fine.
Each minute is one.
We're gonna open it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from there.
Perfect.
We
Thank
can
you so
unplug
much.
that.
Happy to be of service.
If you unplug that, is it fine?
I have no idea.
You want to put it between us? Oh, that scared me. What's up, man?
Huh? Yes. What?
Paneling. Paneling. We don't know what we're doing right now.
Would you like your glasses back? No. Hey, JB. You want your glasses? Not yours, but.
That's so funny.
All right, sick.
My initials are JPC.
Oh, that works.
Very nice.
Hello, welcome back from lunch. Thank you to those who got back on time. I mean, we're starting late, but that's fine. Okay, so this has been a bit of a change from the program. Cody and I are going to do more of a chat than a panel, and then we'll ask questions. If you have a question in the middle, that's fine. Just let us know. We're fine to answer anything and everything well within reason. I'll avoid any question I don't want to answer, you know. Standard protocol. Okay, so Cody is with us from the DoD CDAO. I am from Dawn CDAO, and we're going to talk about defense data products and our approaches to do so.
Awesome. So I want to start off, first I guess I'll introduce myself. Cody Ferguson. I'm with OSD CDAO, stood up a few years ago now. I lead our data and AI services division, so that encompasses obviously data products, data governance, all of our data operations and automations within the Advana platform, cross-domain, pretty much anything data or AI related, you name it. So data products has been a really big topic for us and a place that we've put a lot of emphasis in the platform over the past probably 18 months now. As we introduced our API layer in the Advana platform, we realized very quickly we needed a very solid way to manage and maintain the vast, the plethora of data that we have in the platform. Probably about 6 years ago, we started in the financial management arena with bringing all that data into the platform and making it accessible and understandable by applying common data models to that data. That was very successful, but as we started to expand to the other business domains in the department, we quickly amassed close to 500 different data sources, and the next step in that journey is making that data more usable for our customers. So data products, probably not really a new idea, but again, an area that we've spent a lot of time on. It's really just a specialized collection of particular data sets that are meant to answer specific questions or missions. I'll give some examples of some of the data products we've built later on, but wanted to touch on some of the key principles of data products first. The first one here is discoverability. So what we've done in terms of making these data products discoverable is creating centralized GitLab repositories where we store all of the information about these data products. We also make them discoverable through our data catalog. and through the developer portal, obviously, where customers actually get connected to those data products via API endpoints. Addressability, that kind of feeds into the first one, but making sure they're discoverable in catalog through the API portal, and there's specific locations that they can actually be accessed. Understandability and trustworthiness, I think, is probably two of the biggest areas or principles behind data products. The whole purpose of creating a data product is to take data that was previously very hard to use or understand and create a product that is easily understood by an end user to answer their specific questions. And then, of course, trustworthiness. There's obviously a massive challenge across the Department of Defense when it comes to trustworthiness of data, particularly when you're using that data to make decisions that could potentially save someone's life. So you obviously need a ton of trust in the data that you're using to inform those decisions. So we do that through applying data quality to these particular data products. There's probably 8 different dimensions of data quality that we actually utilize in the platform, and essentially just make that discoverable in the catalog along with the data product. The next two here, native accessibility and independently valuable. So really want to make sure that these things are very easy to access, both in terms of the metadata associated with them, but also to the API endpoint itself. Again, we do that through the catalog, through the API developer portal. It's very easy now to publish a data product to that GitLab repo and then make it discoverable automatically through the catalog and through that API developer portal. But the independently valuable principle here is extremely important. We want to make sure that this data can really stand on its own and becomes a product that anyone can discover and pull off the shelf and immediately consume. Interoperability, I think that goes without saying. Obviously, if you're making these available through API endpoints, it's very easy to use between platforms, so we don't want these data products to be locked into Advana. We want to make sure the rest of the department, no matter where you're consuming your data, can access it and use that data. Security, that's a pretty broad category and a very squishy topic, I would say, especially when you get into this weird realm of federated computational governance. But for the most part, ensuring that obviously the security of the data, both in storage at rest and then in transport, it's obviously encrypted and things like that, which are really native functions of using GovCloud. But in addition to that, essentially tagging the individual elements, ensuring that we've got SCGs associated with them. We know whether there's sensitive or restricted data might contain PII or PHI in some cases, but making sure that that's understood. I think where we're headed in that area is along the lines of federated computational governance is as other platforms start to consume this data, ensuring that there's some sort of security model that can be easily consumed to enforce attribute-based access controls on that data in external systems. Anything you want to add there? Good?
Good to mine.
All right, next slide. Cool. Okay, so this is really kind of just a map of our brains in terms of how we look at data products and how it works within the platform. So we have tons of curated data, as I alluded to earlier, around 500 different data sources in our storage layer just on Nipper alone. We move those through a medallion architecture, bronze, silver, and gold. As that data moves through that medallion architecture, the data is continuously refined. And theoretically, as it reaches that gold state, it is curated to the point where it is meant to answer a very specific question or mission need. Once it gets there, that's where a lot of these API endpoints are actually deployed from. So we use open API specs. We store all the documentation and code related to that curated data in a README and GitLab, along with sample queries. We've started to develop data contracts, which contains the metadata, data schema, and dictionaries, and then any associated data quality measures that are applied to that data to ensure that it is trustworthy and it's meeting some minimum standards there. And then that gets published to the data catalog, as I mentioned earlier, and then is made accessible through those API endpoints in our developer portal. From there, it's really accessible by any consumer to pull into a business intelligence tool, a mission application, an AI/ML model. And then I think the really important piece of this is that feedback loop there down at the bottom, collecting solicited and unsolicited feedback, making sure that we're automatically logging and monitoring the data and how it's being consumed and used, but also continuing to refine it. These things are like living, breathing products is really how we view them. So we continuously update those data products and refine them throughout the life cycle to make sure that they're providing the most trustworthy and the most up-to-date information possible. Yeah, I think that's all on this slide. And this one. Okay, so this is really just, again, talking about the architecture more or less. So again, we're consuming data sources from across the departments, whether those are internal, in some cases public data sources, they could be streaming or batch, but they come into our landing zone and we process the raw data and move it through that medallion architecture. Again, we use a couple different tools to be able to do that, but it is moved through that medallion architecture and then ultimately published to the data catalog in an automated fashion. From there, any developer can come in and create their open API specs for those API endpoints and deploy those through a CI/CD pipeline. And then they are made available to consumers. Within the developer portal, anyone can come in and request access to those individual endpoints, and then we have the essentially data stewards or data product owners approving access to those endpoints based on the need and the requests for that data. Moving to the next slide here. Okay, so one of the ways we did this very rapidly is we utilized data product teams to kind of work with specific mission owners. So they really started to work with folks like Transcom or the logistics community. In some cases, they worked with DHRA on some personnel data. We really had them spread out across the department and start to develop these reusable patterns, standards, and then ultimately data products for some of the data that we knew, looking through logs and usage metrics in the platform, which data was actually being consumed the most. And that helped point us in the direction of where we could immediately provide value by turning that data into a data product. So they worked to develop and establish some data product management processes and standards. We created a data product playbook to show how we were applying those best practices and developing these data products. And then they ultimately started to field some very key data products that are being consumed across the department today. One example of that was the maritime shipments data product that they created, enabled Transcom to easily make their maritime shipments data available when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed and there were ships stuck in port there that had household goods on those ships for military members that were PCSing. So we were able to immediately highlight through the use of that data product what shipments were stuck in that location and which ones were going to be delayed, and make that information available back to the commander at Transcom and the different services so they could plan accordingly. Again, key activities are really continuing to refine these data products and establishing reusable patterns, and then continuing to iterate on those processes. And then we spent a lot of time training and educating both internal and external users on how to both create and maintain these data products, and how to manage it through that life cycle, which ultimately met this vision that we were really striving for, which is moving to defense-wide data product management. And I think it's really been a foundational change for us in CDAO, and particularly the Advana platform. I think in the past we put a big focus on just breaking through cultural barriers and access to data. And today we're highly focused on making that data much more consumable for our end users. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so that's the large DoD perspective, but how does that, we're at Dawn IT West, how does that affect Dawn? And how are we thinking about it? So very similarly to what Cody is saying, we want in our enaction of this to have clear and standard pathways to create discoverable, reusable, documented, and deployable products. So I do want to allay fears. Data products and a focus on data products doesn't mean that if somebody needs the raw data that they can't get access to it. Some of our deep data scientists, data analysts, data engineers need that full access. That's a different thing. But for the people who are just trying to do higher level analytics, who just need the data to have already been parsed, already cleaned, already made understandable, as Cody said, we want that to be easy and accessible for them, something that they can reach to and trust immediately. And that immediate trust saves so much time in the pipeline. How many of us have struggled with trusting the data that we got, or saying, I don't know if this is in the format I need, but I have to use it anyway, this is what I've got, or this has 1,000 fields and I needed 4. Being able to neck that down and have those in a reusable format is what we're going after. And the data product framework has made that easier and more attainable for DoD and Dawn specifically. So we're hoping that this also enables us to have less data silos. We want less one-time use things. I'll get into in a later slide how we're hoping more data products can come to the top, but initially we're hoping to leverage data sharing design patterns to be able to move through that, so that people can move through those wickets to when they make something that they think, hey, I think a lot of people would use this. This could be valuable to a lot of different folks, that they have an ability to actually share that. Our other big point and hope is that this is very tech agnostic. A data product doesn't this only works in this one single software. A data product is reusable across many different software, so it doesn't matter what tool you're using for your analytics. You have the ability to dive in and use this data regardless. So we're also hoping for a modern delivery of these key capabilities in this, and data for the entire enterprise. So these are data points, data sets, data sources that have been tailored specifically for enterprise use. It's not I filtered this data to be for my specific one niche group, but this is a large scale, it could be reusable over and over and over again. And hopefully to more empower our teams through data mesh constructs. I know you've heard us talk about that throughout the day today and in previous IT Wests and Easts, but we want to be able to move data securely from anywhere and to anywhere so that people, especially our service members, have what they need when they need it. And data products really can make that a lot easier. Again, because you're doing I know this, I trust this, I can immediately deploy it, rather than them having to get access, call the right person to say, hey, Bob, can I have your data? I heard that it was on your hard drive somewhere, to make that a lot simpler and easier. So with our methodical approaches to managing these data products, we're hoping to save obviously cost and time. Like I've mentioned, the access. We want data, again, like I mentioned yesterday, not to be a supporting actor, but it's the main character. It's a strategic asset and it can be used as such over and over, just like any other strategic asset that's easy to get access to when you need it, that you can request and know that you're gonna get it when you need it in the time. We wanna repeat and replicate successes. So if somebody succeeds, we don't want them to succeed just in their own division, their own department, their own branch. We want that success to travel up so others can build on it instead of 12 of us having to do the exact same thing. And we're hoping this product methodology will help you go through the steps to be able to move that up. You'll see, you've heard Stephanie talk today about decope and how we're hoping to use that governance space to be able to move things more up. So just like you could have a problem in your data governance, you also have the ability to say, hey, I have this thing that I think could be applicable to everyone, and I would like to do that more frequently. We are doing that currently through the Jupyter Enterprise service. So we are hoping for Jupyter to be able to share those data products, and that's where you can get access to them as of today. And that may broaden out over the coming year, but that's currently where you can have access. So, Cody talked to, that's correct. What is a product to be up here? So one, it can inform our discussion so that when you're asking questions, you're seeing the definition there. Because I know this is, for some people, this is a brand new construct. For some, they've been doing this for years and years. We hope this approach ensures a framework that can be used across our enterprise in its entirety. We know that in Ms. Rathbun's ISV 2.0 Decide is at the center of this. We want to be able to prepare, connect, and use all of the data that we have access to in the dawn. And data products is an easier way for us to move this forward. So we're going to start with a couple examples of things. In dawn specifically, some of our bigger data products that we've worked on are the Hermes data product. Who has heard of Hermes from the dawn perspective? Yeah. That's fantastic. So 2 years ago, that was not the same. Hermes has come a long way. Spencer, how many messages have we, are we on par with having parsed? 11 million messages that have gone from an unstructured format into something completely usable. Message traffic that took months and months to be able to get access to if you were wanting the original data, you now in a couple of days can have access to that data. So that's a data product we're working on sharing far and wide when necessary and when needed. Obviously, I'm putting the caveats of you have to have a need to know, so on and so forth. We are also piloting new efforts, like with our N4 team, who are doing a log cop that they're hoping to make more accessible and more available. That tool has come a long way in a short, like 120-day pilot at this point. It's moved from nothing to an existing capability to be accessed for a common log cop picture. So actually seeing what's going on in our logistics space. Now that's still growing, that's not something that we're putting out, but we're working on it. You can see that we're building more. And we're hoping more and more of these, in the dawn specifically, rise to the top. Okay, Cody, from your perspective, what makes a good data product?
Obviously, in addition to the various principles that we talked about earlier, I actually think it's much less about the data itself and more about how the data is managed and how that data product is refined over its life cycle. So I think what really makes a good data product is one that it can answer a specific question or need for a broad set of consumers. But two, the data steward or the data product owner is continually refining that and making it much more trustworthy for decision making, providing a ton of documentation about how that data should be used to answer specific questions. So I tend to think that while having the data is obviously a necessity, it's less about the data itself and more about how a data product is managed that makes it ultimately a good data product.
Yeah, I would really foot stomp the documentation piece of that. If you're going to make a product reusable, you have to understand every single assumption that was made in making that product. So then you don't go forward with it thinking that the opposite assumption had been made and moving your analysis farther on a misplaced information point. So having those assumptions, having the metadata, having understandability throughout that context, I think is the cornerstone of a data product.
Totally.
Okay, the opposite of that. What's a bad data product?
Yeah, obviously one that is not managed and doesn't answer a specific question. But I think you can make a data product too broad in some cases, where it tries to provide value to too many use cases as opposed to a specific answer to a question or mission set. And so in some cases, I've seen cases where data products are created and they don't focus on a specific use. It's more or less a way to get connected to data when you don't have a specific question for that data. And I think that actually really makes a bad data product. One, because you're getting much more information than you need, and two, you're just consuming data to consume data in a lot of cases, as opposed to actually answering a specific mission or question.
I like that. I think it's a spectrum. You don't want that end, but you also don't want the beginning end, where it's this data point is only relevant to these 5 people, and it's super relevant to them. That doesn't mean that analytic isn't worth it to them. But if it only applies to 5 people, we don't need to spend the cycles of, even if it's an amazing product, if it only applies to 5, we don't need to spend the cycles to move it through the process to get it approved as a data product. That would be a lot of effort for little return at that point.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then I guess on that note too, like, while we're investing a lot of time and resources into building data products, I think another key focus of ours is actually enabling others to create their own data products. So where there are those niche use cases, we're not going to say, don't create a data product for that. I think for us, it's about return on investment and resources and staffing that we have to provide the biggest value to the department and get a lot more adoption. But the tools and capabilities are there to enable any end user to build their own data product.
For the Dawn, it's imperative that we have our team members across the Dawn help with those data products. We at the CDAO office cannot create or implement every single data product. We just don't have the staff. We need people who are out there amongst the different services, amongst the different organizations, branches, bases, what have you, to be creating these data products and helping move them through the cycle. We need you to have the willingness to put them through the cycle and maybe do a little bit of the legwork to make it discoverable and understandable up front so that we can have more available for the entirety of the Dawn to use. We want data to be accessible and we want it to be trustworthy. Those are Stephanie and I's big tenets this year. And having your help is the only way we're going to be able to move that forward. Why do you think data products are important? Why do we need them? We haven't had them yet.
Yeah. I kind of, as I briefly touched on earlier, the past 4 years in the position I've been in with Advana and being directed by the Deputy Secretary to get access to all these different data sources in the departments, we broke down a lot of barriers and a lot of cultural barriers by doing that. And it kind of became standard practice, and in a lot of ways, we spent much less time reaching out to source system owners to get access to their data, and they were actively coming to us to bring their data into the Advana platform. I think that paradigm is starting to shift now because of that adoption, that widespread adoption, and these source systems actively wanting to put their data into the centralized repository or data lake. And the shift is now in making that data usable and creating these feedback loops. So I think data products are so important because it's taking data that, one, we previously didn't even have access to, and two, then making it very valuable for decision making and making that data able to stand on its own. And so I think as the new administration puts a big focus on wanting to use data to inform its leaders' decision-making. If you read any of the transcripts from the confirmation hearings, I think Advana was mentioned at least 2 or 3 times there, where there's going to be another big focus on ensuring senior leaders across the department are using Advana as a platform to answer these questions from senior leadership and then inform their decision making. And so I think that's why data products are becoming extremely important to ensure that there's trustworthiness in the data. People understand how that data should be used and for what purposes, what questions can be answered using that data, and then ultimately making it interoperable so it's not just focused on business decisions, but operational or mission decisions as well.
To give a hypothetical, fully hypothetical, can I hypothetical 3 times, example from Dawn. We don't want a space where the CNO has asked her teams, I need an answer to this question, and 2 different teams come back with 2 different answers. We want to have a trusted data source, a trusted data product that they can go to and say, I know that this has been the approved source to answer this question, so that we have that authoritativeness as we're giving our senior leaders these answers, just like Cody's saying. Okay, I want to open it up for questions. I'm hoping for audience engagement. Be nice to me, Nathan.
Hello. Thank you. Okay, so data products as a mechanism of identifying authoritative medallion gold standard data sets, a quicker way of discovering those and accessing them. My first question would be, you mentioned the process that you have today for identifying and I guess approving a data product. Could you describe a little bit what that process looks like and then highlighting any governance in the process?
Mm-hmm. You want me to start?
Go on.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier we use a specific open API spec and a centralized GitLab repo. So one, the data product is ultimately created via gold table, as you alluded to, in our data layer. But then the open API spec has a specific set or schema associated with it that has to be filled out, and then is pushed through that CI/CD process, which is essentially a merge request to that GitLab repo. And then we perform some checks on that, ensure that things are filled out accordingly. I wish I had the list of those things here in front of me, but it's, what is the data source? What is the data table? Who's the owner of that data product? What is the sensitivity of the data in that data product? Things like that are all populated in that open API spec and then merged into that main branch in GitLab. And then that automatically then publishes that endpoint to our API portal. From there, in order to get access to those, user just goes to that developer portal, selects a specific API endpoint that they want to get access to. In the open API spec, it identifies who that approver should be. And the requests go to that approver to approve access for those specific use cases for that endpoint.
So for Dawn specifically on the front end of that, before it even gets there, we're currently using the Jupyter use case process because we're sharing via Jupyter. So it already has that layer of governance through the use case review board of hey, this is the first review point, then it has a technical review point, then it comes into the platform, and you'll see through those steps. I know those are broad, but bringing that into the platform, again, getting it through the technical review within the platform, and then the process that Advana has set up.
Roger. So I'm familiar with the use case review board on the Dawn side. At a Dawn level, is there something equivalent that's being utilized to adjudicate which products are approved?
On the Dawn level?
The DoD level. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in the past that has primarily gone through these different data product teams that have been aligned to these specific areas, like logistics or personnel. Going forward, because we've made this pipeline so accessible and the tools can be utilized by anyone, we're doing less of the approval and like the data product creation ourselves, and leaving that up to the data owners and the folks that should be managing these, right? We're not best suited to like tell you how to utilize your data, so we want the folks that understand that data best to be creating these data products and refining them throughout the life cycle. And so I would say we don't necessarily have an approval process outside of that CI/CD pipeline and ensuring that it meets those minimum specs for an API endpoint. And then I guess, yeah, beyond that, just the request process to get access to those endpoints, that's just inherent in creating the data product itself.
Gotcha. So the reason I ask those two questions is because when we talk about data products in the context of here's effectively a data set that is utilized, it has been authorized, certified as gold standard to meet a particular use case. Use cases, if we are not managing the differentiation between our use cases, the scope of those use cases can vary quite significantly. And it's very easy to see not just a hypothetical, but a reality in which multiple data products exist that serve very similar parallels and overlap. And I'm really interested long term in seeing how we overcome that, because it's easy now, let's say when we are 50, it's much harder in the future when we're at thousands. And what I would ask sort of as a challenge to this is this idea of data products, while incredibly valuable, is very, very close to establishing data standards, which is a far more effective model once we get to the thousands and orders of magnitude difference. And so I'm curious what, if you can speak to both the DoD and the DON perspective of what that transition and roadmap looks like for the overall community, who I believe has been asking for data standards for quite some time.
I personally think data standards and data products do have a different space. So for the data products themselves, inherently within them, you have this documentation of here's what it's supposed to be used for. And because we're in a technological platform, thank goodness, we'll be able to do more automated checks of, hey, is this covering the same space when you get to that thousands metric, more than our tens that we have right now. And not only that, we hope that our governance boards, through our labeling, our metadata tagging, and our tagging of those data products, will be able to quickly pull those and have a human in the loop to review. Because we've learned, hopefully through our mistakes, that having a completely automated check is not going to do anything because people will just use different words. We're very creative in linguistics across the Don to make things seem very different from other things. And that doesn't have to be a nefarious thing. That's just people speak differently. So having human-in-the-loop processes on top of these automated to make it easier to go through the thousands, and then have a person to go through the fives, the threes, to actually look at those. And then data standards, I will let Cody.
Yeah, I think, I guess my perspective is we directed the creation of data stewards across the department for a reason, right? So each of the PSAs at the OSD level were directed to create their own position for data stewards and data officers. And those PSAs are broadly aligned to the different functional areas in the department. Like if you look at ANS, obviously they are very much focused on acquisition data. And so I view like that role as a data steward, also to be managing data product creation and the answering of various questions of that data. And so I think they would be kind of the first in line to actually be managing duplicative data products and ensuring that we don't have multiple answering similar or the same questions. But Beyond that, I think it's really probably monitoring and alerting and looking at which data products are being consumed the most by specific users. We have all of that log data to actually see, like, is this user querying these two data products the most? And then starting to deconflict if we think those are published from the same data source, like, are they starting to kind of merge too closely together, and we can sunset one of those and put our focus on one as opposed to two of those. It also helps that we have team members kind of embedded in almost every organization across the department at this point, so we're very easily able to, one, communicate where we are building these data products and the various use cases for those, but then also deconflict any duplicativeness there. So.
Kind of two questions rolled under the same umbrella, I think. So you noted, and you touched upon this a little bit in terms of you're interested in data products that are at an enterprise level. Do you have like assessment criteria of what constitutes sort of an enterprise data product versus something at a lower level, or like is there like an impact of what that data product goes to? And then kind of, I think on the same side, different side of the same coin, is what is the distinction, if any, between a data product and a derived data set that would just go into your catalog and be connected to?
I'm trying to remember the
Those are,
question.
they're great questions. Do you want to start?
Sure. Trish, remind me of the first part of your question. I got distracted by the second part.
Criteria for assessment of what?
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. So, like Cody mentioned, I don't want every data product to be an enterprise level product. I want all data products to be available at the enterprise level, so that they're rolling up to. Now, of course, eventually this will roll down, and you may have a NIWIC pack product that is specific to NIWIC pack that's really just makes sense for them, and we can work through that in our data governance and our data to flow design patterns. But initially, we want data products, even if they're not applicable to the entire enterprise, because I don't expect every person across the enterprise to need to answer the exact same data questions. But I want them accessible for those that do, or if another group emerges that also needs an access to that answer to that question. So those criteria will be those same ones that you see, not on that slide because I didn't change it. There we go. On that slide, the discoverability, the addressability, the understandability, trustworthiness, and so forth, and the security of it. So those will be our initial, and then we will refine the process over and over as we find things that we missed and messed up and just continue to get better. I'll let you take.
Yeah, I think you kind of like maybe indirectly touched on like the return on investment of building a data product, and I think that's like something that's really, really hard to measure, and is very, very necessary to ensuring that like we're creating something that is actually worthwhile, right? And I know for us, like we didn't really have anywhere to start other than looking at what data within the platform was already being queried the most, like what is the 10% of the data in the platform that's being used by like 90% of the users, and that like pointed us directly to which like specific data sources or data sets we should start focusing on to create data products from. And then I think like there's on the back end of that like continuing to monitor the usage of those data products, right? So once you deploy them, like how often are they being called? How often are they updated by the data product owner or the data steward? And that kind of more or less tells you whether they're worthwhile. You know, if thousands of users are querying that same data product on a daily basis, then theoretically they're finding some value from it. You might not be able to measure that value or immediately know what that value is, because again, we're not you know, SMEs in all of these different business domains, but that does, you know, help kind of provide some reassurance that you have invested time and resources in the right place.
Hi again. Asked my question earlier. Tony Evans with DAS&P. My question this time is going to be about who has ownership on these data products. Is it the data owner when there's an issue? Or do we need to reach out to, I guess, you guys for support for getting that fixed? Just because I know that there is turnover about who's actually in charge of these products. We run into that with one of the systems, FPDS, where there's issues that we need to get fixed. Try identifying them. But we've kind of run into a roadblock of like, how do we get it fixed in the system so we don't have to keep doing a manual process to fix it? So
Yeah, FPDS, man. Sorry, that one just hurts my brain a little bit. But no, I think that's totally a fair question. Within the catalog itself, we've created separate assets for data products. So they're automatically posted to that catalog, both in the developer portal and then in the data catalog itself. But those have a specific owner and a POC associated with those. So like if you have issues or questions, there should be both like a functional owner and a technical owner of that endpoint. And those questions obviously should go directly to them. You can always submit a trouble ticket. I know people hate to hear that, but it does help us like identify like broader categories of where issues actually reside in the platform. So whether it gets an immediate response or not, it does like we do look at those and like figure out where we should be focusing a lot of our time on troubleshooting and fixing the platform. But yeah, I think catalog is probably going to be like the best place to start for a lot of that. And the ownership, like I think in some cases it's the data source owner. In other, especially like if we're talking about a very legacy system or SAP, like where it's really hard to get data out of. A lot of those data source providers can't wait to make an API endpoint so that they're not putting a lot of strain on their source system to provide that data. It's readily consumable via an API endpoint in another system like Advana. I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Part of that documentation required for a data product is going to have because not always do our data owners or data stewards actually make those data products. They may just say, there's the raw data, have fun.
Yeah.
And so we may have a different team that says, I've actually taken the raw data, I've engineered it into a precise format. So by being a data product, you have to have somebody accountable for that because we still are at a place where we need a backstop. And that's not going to end for a while in the dawn. So that backstop will need to be changed and updated as those positions rotate out. But there's also that if there's an accessibility issue, if there's I tried to reach out to this person and it went nowhere. You will, because it's available in our platforms, at this level, you should be able to reach out to the teams there. Like Cody said, either a trouble ticket or for Jupyter specifically, we have Jupyter technical support as an option that can also help with those connection issues or hey, this has not been updated and I really needed it to be.
thank you.
No problem. Okay. Oh, go for it.
You just said something that resonated with me. I built a lot of data products for civilian airports around the world, and as part of those contracts, it was non-negotiable that we had to stand up dashboards. And so we did a lot of development work, we stood them up, and we went and measured the usage on them, and it was crickets. I'm wondering if you've ever encountered that and how you dealt with it.
For monitoring the usage specifically?
Well, just building a product that the client was adamant they needed for data because dashboards are sexy.
Yeah.
Everybody wants them and they make great PowerPoints, but at the end of the day, nobody's using them.
Yeah.
So that development time was just wasted.
Yeah.
And have you encountered that, and what did you do to mitigate that going forward?
Yeah, maybe not so much on the data product side, but definitely like dashboards in general that have been created in the platform in the past. You're right, very sexy. People love maps. It's really funny. Like if you throw like a map of a world and like overlay data on it in a dashboard, people go crazy for it. But like the value of that is pretty low in a lot of cases, unless it's like very real time. And so we've definitely encountered that. I think we really try to, I guess, force those requirements generators to identify like the number of users they think that dashboard will support, dashboard or data product. and we try to validate that against other metrics like the usage of the data that we're seeing through different queries in the platform. But it is, I mean, again, as you know, it's very hard to like determine upfront how much something is going to be used and what that ROI really is, especially given the complexity of like the Department of Defense in general, right? Like it is a Fortune 100 company in every single business domain, essentially. Like is one of the biggest logistics and supply chain managers. It, you know, has hospitals all over the world. It has tons of planes and ships, bigger than you know FedEx and other commercial carriers. So it is like infinitely more complex in that regard, and it's hard for any one person to be a SME in all of those things.
Hey, just an extension of that question, I think. Erica Ford with EY, a partner there. I was going to ask about adoption, which is an extension, I think, of what you were saying, which is in general, how does that factor in when a request comes in, and then once it's done, it's deployed, holistically, the adoption of the product, you know, wherever it was deployed for the use it was deployed. So you talked about some of the metrics you look at in terms of adoption, but I'm wondering around the communications, the prep for the users. Is there learning scenarios that happen along the life cycle of the development?
We do see the life cycle of a product or a dashboard or something that has been made. There's definitely a life cycle. And we see that in the usage metrics. We see that in how it's accessed. And we compare that right now, at least on our end, to how much processing power is it taking. Is no one accessing this except for maybe once a month or once a quarter, but it's somehow updating every single day. And so that's something that right now we do work with our use case teams of hey, maybe this only needs to run before you need it. Or we don't need to run this every day. It doesn't have to have by-the-minute data updates. So it's because sometimes when you're building it, you don't understand what your scope is going to be. You don't know that, okay, I'm actually only going to need this once a month. And so making sure it's an open use case and not I built it, I'm done, I'm over with, but more of a communication pathway that says, okay, I've seen how I'm actually going to utilize this and change those requirements as I go through the life cycle. And be able to update those more frequently than just a one-time I built it and I'm done.
Got it. Thank you.
I think the communication that you alluded to those end users is very important as well. And then like the education and like training. And so a lot of that is done in the catalog and like the actual API spec where, or the repo where that resides. There's a README associated with it. We provide, as you can see on the screen here, some example queries that should be run on that data. And so I think like when folks are discovering those data products, they can look at things like that and immediately determine whether those are going to be useful to them. And then as she mentioned, like the monitoring on the back end in terms of like how often or frequent those are actually being consumed is just as important. But there's a lot of work, I think, that goes into just like educating people on how that data product should be used.
Okay, I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank Cody for presenting with me and being flexible with the change in presenters and style. If you have questions for us afterwards, no, thank you. Just kidding. You're welcome to come find us. We'll be around. We're now on break, and then we'll come back later for more presentations in the data track. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
One thing I was wondering is if when you put an intake, like the request comes in, are there like
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Yes, very much.
No. Is it? Oh. Yeah.
it's like it's just factored in?
I don't know. I've been pushing that. We'll go up. Yeah, I'll be around.